right, so now that we have a basic rudimentary, knowledge of the Unreal Engine, and we've got in here and started messing around with it a little bit, let's start drilling down into getting to know some specifics of how to actually work in here. So one of the big things that we need to be aware of is saving. Unreal Engine does not automatically save. At least not everything. It will save some things, but not all your changes will be saved. One thing you can look for is on the bottom, you can see where it says 1 unsaved. From mine, yours might say a different number, but it'll show unsaved. Now this means that you have some things that are unsaved. You could click down here, but it's better practice to go up to the File menu, the top left, File, and then click Save All. And now the little asterisk that was there, so if I go and move this over, we can see there's a little star here saying that this is not saved. If you go to File and Save All, now it's gone away and it is saved. You also should go to File, Save Current Level. That will save the level as you have it here. But in reality, we don't want to work in this level. There's too much stuff here. So let's go ahead and make a new level. So first thing we're going to do is go to our content drawer. On the left, you should see all and then content, and you can see some different folders that are here. Here, instead of content, with that selected, I'm gonna right click, new folder. And I'm gonna call this maps. And then let's go ahead and double click inside of maps. Well, a map is just a level in a game. We need to make a new level. So if we go to File, New Level, we have some different settings we can work with. We can have Open World Empty, Basic, or Empty Level. Let's go ahead and go with Basic. Now here, there's nothing in our scene beyond, there's a sky, there's some lights, and there's a big ground. Well, if we go to File, Save Current Level, then we can go to our Maps folder. So make sure we have our Maps folder selected. And let's call this My First Map. Then click Save. Now if we go to our content drawer, you can see inside of our Maps folder, we have My First Map. Cool. Except when we actually eventually close Unreal and reopen it, this map won't pull up. We need to set our new default map. So go to File, Edit, Project Settings, Maps and Modes. And here we have our editor startup map. Let's click on that and let's change it to My First Map. So when our editor starts up, this is the map that'll pull up. And then game default map, let's change this as well to My First Map. All right, now we can close that setting. That's done. Let's go ahead and add something into our scene. Let's go to Content Drawer, Starter Content, and you can see a bunch of different folders. Well, let's go into Props, and I'm going to grab one of those tables and drag that into our scene. Place that there, and then I'm going to go to File, Save All. Now, I want to go to my content drawer, and I want to grab this SM statue. I'm going to drag that into my scene. And I want to place this statue on top of the table, right in the middle of it. To do that, click and drag that up and move it over. It's going to be kind of hard to get it precisely placed. Well, because I have to keep changing my views, and that's kind of annoying. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at my different views. If I click on this top right-hand button, it breaks my scene into a grid of 4. So I have my original view down here, but then I have this side view, and it is a orthographic wireframe. We'll talk about orthographic and perspective later, but just know that wireframe means you don't see the material, you just see the actual underlying mesh. And when I change one of these, it does change the rest of them, but I can precisely control my view. So I have here a back view, a right view, and a top view. And I can actually use this top view with my object selected, and I can drag it, make sure I get it right there in the middle. And you can see from the back and right view, it's too far down, so I can click and drag that up. And there we go. I now have this placed perfectly in the middle of my scene. And all these menus can be changed, so I can change the size of them so I can get it precisely, set up where I want it to be. Maybe I only want like a little small view, a little preview there. Or maybe I don't want this to be a top view. What if I want this to be a perspective? So I have two views of the same object. Or what if I want this to be a top view, but I want it to be lit? So here it says wireframe. I can change this to lit. Now I have a lit version of that perspective, which may or may not be helpful depending on what you're working with. So you can change your view of things, and you can work with the different settings to really fine tune your placements. But we don't always want this. So if I click on any one of these boxes, there's this little maximize or restores this viewport. Click on that. That is now the only viewport that's there. Now, one of the things that usually ends up happening accidentally is maybe you accidentally close your outliner. Where do you get it? How can you find it? Well, you can go to Window, and you can search up here for outliner. And bring that back. But one thing I find really helpful to kind of basically cover all your bases, if you go to first off File, Save All, so make sure you save everything. You go to Window, Load Layout, Default Editor Layout. That resets everything in your layout to the defaults. So if you ever get stuck, you can't find something, you don't know where it's at, if you go to Window, Load Layout, Basic Editor Layout, it will reset your layout of your scene, of your screen. Now, with our different views, on the top left, you see this perspective. If I click on that, I can actually set up the view to be top, bottom, left, or right. And if you look, you can see that there's this perspective view and orthographic. Now, the difference between perspective and orthographic is not the wireframe, right? So if I can actually set that up to be lit just like the other objects. The difference is perspective has depth. Things are further away from each other, or they look further away from you or closer to you. In fact, if I go ahead and drag in I'll drag a chair in. I'll set that up there. I can see that my chair is in front of my table. If I go to, let's say, the left view or front, the table's not there. Or if I go to back, the table is shown as being behind the chair. They're layered on top of each other. You can't see any depth. With perspective view, you see depth, where you can tell that objects are closer to each other than others. Now, orthographic view from a top-down approach can be really useful when laying out a level. Right, so let's say I want to make sure I have chairs placed in very precise locations. I can place everything here and not worry about depth getting in the way. And that can just make it easier to lay things out. For the most part, though, you're going to be sticking in the perspective view. Now, with the different view modes, you can see that there is lit, which means light works. If I switch this to unlit, I get a really flat version of it. But you might see, if you do this yourself, the performance is so much smoother. With lit, movements is, it's smooth, but there's a little bit of lag in there. If you go to unlit, you can still see colors, but lighting isn't set up. This can be really useful when you're working with really large scenes with a lot of things in there, and you don't want to have to worry about the computational power behind it. Then you also have, like I said earlier, wireframe, where you see a wireframe of your models. This can get a little tricky to work with, depending on what you're doing. But sometimes it can be good to see what the actual mesh shape looks like. And if you look around, actually, you see this giant dome, a giant sphere. Well, this is called the sky sphere. If you look at the outliner, I can actually select that. I can hide it if I want to. But a giant sphere that when we're in lit view gives the impression of being a sky. If I hide that, actually doesn't do anything because of other factors, but just know that that sky sphere is what controls the overworld. I can set this up to be lighting only, so it'll only show lighting, gets rid of most of the colors. Good to see if how your lights are placed. Or maybe you want it to be sort of player collision, so you can see the colliders that you're working with, which we'll talk about later. But the colliders are basically simplified versions of the geometry that are used to determine if two things are hitting each other. I'm going to go ahead and switch that back to lit. Then we have show. Here we can show a bunch of different things. So we can hide or show different, like, let's say we want to show the collision on top of things. So we can actually see that collider. It's maybe a little hard to see in the video, but there's like this little spider web kind of mesh that's around there, where that's the collider. Or I want to hide that again. Or maybe we want to hide all of our clouds. Or we want to hide the atmosphere. Or we want to hide all static meshes. We can do that, and it doesn't remove them. It just hides them. So I'm going to turn this static meshes back on them. And there we go. So you're going to have a couple different challenges for this one. First off, I want you to create folders in your content drawer back here in the base content. I want you to create folders for blueprints, materials, meshes, widgets, and props. So go ahead and give that a shot now. And so this is what my content drawer looks like once I've created those folders. Like I said, I added in a blueprints folder, a maps folder, which we did that earlier, materials, meshes, and props, as well as a widgets folder. Then I want you to set up the grid view, where you have the 2x2 grid, where you have the 4 different panels there. And I want you to place a few objects into your scene. You can go from content drawer, third person, content drawer, starter content, props, direct from here. Or you can actually go up this top button right here, a little quickly add shapes cube. So you can add in different objects into your scene that way as well. Some basic primitives. Add a few objects to your scene. Set your view to be the 2x2 grid with wireframe and place them in some intentional way. So stack the objects on top of each other, or line them all up in a line or something like that. Just show that you have taken some time to learn how to manipulate your objects in some way. I'll show you an example in a moment. So I'm looking for a screenshot of something like this, where you have your 4x4 or your 2x2 grid, where I just put 2 cubes on top of each other and then a cone on top of that. Intentionally placed, and I use the different views to make sure they lined up perfectly. Also take a screenshot of your content drawer with all your different folders in there. Then finally take a screenshot of your scene with your editor layout reset. So we're going to go to, again, Window, Load Layout, Default Editor Layout, and we'll set that back to normal. Take a screenshot of just this, that I can see that you can, in fact, change between the different views. All right, that's it for this one. Thanks.